Hi, I'm Dandelion Queen. We will be talking about an analysis of John Milton's When I Consider How My Life is Spent. John Milton's poem, When I Consider How My Life is Spent, is centered around the question posed by the narrator, presumably Milton himself, to God, to how he became blind and how he is to continue to serve within the state of blindness. The sonnet presents an internal dialogue in which the poet attempts to overcome his own personal discouragement through his faith in God, and ends in a recognition that God will successfully intervene in times of doubt. Reference to blindness serve as a physical means of illustrating a metaphysical circumstance within the poem. The lack of ability to see, read, have faith in God, despite the fact that blindness in the poem is ostensibly attributed to the speaker himself, it is clear that the poem is considering the potential disabling afflictions which may exist within the reader as a loss of faith. The first word of the poem, when, provides the reader with a feeling of suspense, a lingering question of, consider how his life is spent, which is not resolved until the 7th and 8th line, when the question that such consideration raises is finally articulated. Does God extract day labor, light denied? Upon reading the first lines, the reader is immediately taken by a sense that something is coming to an end. There seems to be a tone of sorrow or mourning. The metaphysical use of light is made clear by the fact that light cannot literally be spent. Light presents a way for the speaker to consider how, and to what extent, he uses his sight prior to his blindness. The alliteration in the second line, world and wide, emphasizes the overwhelming feeling of the world after the speaker's loss of sight. Milton also makes it seem as if the entire world has run out of light, rather than growing dark because of a personal affliction. He therefore universalizes his condition through alliterative diction. In lines 3 to 4, and that one talent which is death to hide lodged within me useless, Milton raises concern regarding the use of his talent, and makes reference to the parable of talents from the New Testament. So here's a small bit of what the parable says. In Matthew chapter 25, the Lord entrusts 3 of his servants money or talents. While 2 of the servants use the money to make more money for their master, the third buries the money. When the Lord returns, he is pleased with the first 2 servants and provides them with more responsibility. However, he is furious with the third servant, whom he exiles to darkness, that is equated with death. Talent, in this sense, refers both to the biblical unit of money as well as to the skill. In the narrator's case, Milton, presumably his intelligence and his writing of poetry are both his trade and his skill. However, due to his early blindness, this talent is lodged or buried within the speaker in the same manner as the money or talent in the biblical story. While the speaker claims that his money is as useless as money buried in a desert, he now asserts that though my soul more bent to serve within my Maker and present, this uselessness is not a result of his own will. To the contrary, his soul is bent for the very purpose to use his skill in service of his Maker. He continues, frightful of the consequence of his own ability to use his talent, and his concern that God will scold or chide him. My true account least returning chid. The word account here implies both senses of the word, recorded, narrative, as well as the financial sheet. Here the speaker looks on to God as he is presented in the parable, who might easily cast the poet into darkness more fearful than the one created by his physical blindness, and that the poet can no longer serve God through his writing and therefore is subject to his punishment. The speaker then wonders whether or not God requires physical work or day labor from his followers, even when they lack sight. Doth God exact day labor, light denied? He is asked in line 7, using the term exact here as a demand or charge. Refers back to the concern alluded to earlier, that God might punish him and require him to pay something in return for the labor he has not performed, despite the gift that he has been given. While traditionally most Italian sonnets contain a volta, or a sharp thematic turn dividing the two sections, in this case the awkwardness in lines 7 through 8 is intentional. The first section is consumed by the speaker's attempts to formulate his question, while the second is that of patience interrupting the speaker. Therefore, the transition mimics the awkwardness of someone, patience, preventing the murmur from the speaker, which has nonetheless already been articulated in lines 1 through 6. The relationship between speaker and audience, in this case patience, is intrinsically intimate here, due not only to the speaker's interruption, but also because of the intense confessional nature of the first 6 lines and the comfort provided by the voice that appears in line 9. These are not two strangers speaking. The use of patience as the name of the respondent evokes Christian undertones, in that patience is often seen as a vehicle for achieving other virtues, such as courage and wisdom. However, patience can also be read as the inner voice that provides comfort to his consciousness. The prediction of the murmur by patience could have only been made by someone who knows the speaker well, or is the speaker. Here, patience, or his inner voice, responds, God does not need either man's work or his own gifts, implying that God does not require physical work of men, because he has his own power and the angels in heaven to do as he desires. God does not require anything, because in and of himself God is complete and perfect. Patience finally disputes the speaker's concern of punishment. His God's state is kingly, thousands at his bidding, speed, and posts o land or ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. Here God is more kingly than he is tyrannical. Thus the God of the parable, from whom the speaker feared punishment, is not one with whom the speaker will meet. If God controls a state as large as the entire earth, what need doth he have for the use of everyone's labor? Those who remain strong and wait through the trials of their life are rewarded in heaven and are also serving God. Patience concludes with the vindication of the speaker's forced passivity due to his disabling affliction, through the claim that there are those who also serve by only standing. The poet here, in the concluding couplet, answers the initial question in regards to God's treatment of individuals who does not have the ability to perform day labor, and further answers the predicament of those suffering a disabling affliction. Those who rest and wait are perhaps just as useful as those who toil needlessly in his service. The words rest and wait are emphasized by their juxtaposition with enjambments through the patient's murmur. The enjambments in lines 8 through 12 is halted in lines 13 by the caesura after the word rest, at which the reader must pause. The pause in line 13 emphasizes the last line and foils the reverence for action created by the enjambment. Milton concludes the poem with the line, they also serve who stand and wait. This becomes a comfort to not only the speaker but also to the reader. To stand becomes active, and therein does not stand in contrast to the thousands who in lines 12 through 13 speed without rest. The end pause after line 13 is symbolic of a type of physical rest, which the reader and the speaker receive. And the original speaker now presumably acknowledges as also an act in service of the Lord. The long-awaited rest with the enjambments did not grant, since the utterance of the speaker's question in line 7 might have been reflected first of the original speaker's restlessness at not servicing God, and then Patient's description of the actions of those in service of God. This allows for the entire poem to serve as a self-reassurance and a rediscovery of faith through the active discourse with patience that brings both faith and wisdom, and grants the speaker the subservience to wait. Thus, how his life is spent becomes symbolic not only of the speaker's physical blindness, but the reader's blindness to the symbolic light of God, a light which both the narrator and the reader learn to await. That's it for now.